It was a quiet Saturday morning when the incident took place. I had just finished my morning coffee and was about to head outside to tend to my garden when I saw Karen, the HOA president, walking up to my front door. She was a woman known for meddling in everyone's business, but today she was different. There was an eerie calmness about her, one that suggested something was about to change. I opened the door, and before I could say anything, Karen blurted out, "You've been violating HOA rules, and I'm done letting it slide." She had been looking for excuses to pick on me for weeks, citing everything from my yard's flower arrangements to the slight tilt of my mailbox. But today was different. Today, she was angry, angrier than I had ever seen her before. I calmly told her that I had followed the rules and that she needed to back off. But Karen didn't listen. Instead, her eyes darkened, and she pulled something out of her jacket pocket. In that moment, I froze. It was a gun. Without any warning, she aimed it at me, and before I could react, a loud bang rang out. I felt an intense pain in my shoulder as I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. Blood poured from my wound, pooling around me. I was in shock, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Karen didn't seem fazed at all. As I lay on the ground, struggling to breathe, she took a few steps back, her face twisting with a strange satisfaction. But then something unexpected happened. She turned and started shouting. "She shot me. She attacked me." Karen yelled, her voice filled with faux distress. The pain in my shoulder was overwhelming. Every movement felt like fire shooting through my body, but through the haze, I could hear Karen's increasingly frantic cries. She continued to scream that I had attacked her, that I was the aggressor. I could hardly comprehend her words, especially as blood seeped out of my body, staining the front steps of my house. At that moment, the neighbors, who had been watching from their windows, rushed outside. One of them, Mr. Thompson from down the street, was the first to react. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted, rushing toward me. But Karen quickly cut him off. "She attacked me. She came at me with a weapon." Karen lied, pointing at me with shaking hands. Mr. Thompson didn't know what to think. His eyes flickered from Karen to me. My body slumped on the stairs, my blood soaking into the concrete. The chaos was unfolding too quickly. But it was clear Karen had planned her narrative carefully, knowing exactly what to say to make herself look like the victim. I could barely keep my eyes open as I heard sirens in the distance. The neighbors quickly made way for the police, but I could feel the tension in the air. Karen was still insisting that I had attacked her, but deep down, I knew the truth. She was spinning a story, and I was the scapegoat. When the officers arrived, I could barely hold myself together, but I managed to mumble the words, "She shot me. She's lying." The pain was making it difficult to stay conscious, but I had to make sure my side was heard. The wail of sirens grew louder, and moments later, police officers arrived on the scene. I could hear the crunch of their boots against the gravel as they stepped out of their squad cars, weapons at the ready. My vision blurred as I tried to stay conscious, the pain from the gunshot still agonizing. The first officer, a tall man with a stern look on his face, quickly assessed the situation. Karen was still standing near the steps, holding the gun in her hand and shouting at anyone who would listen. I could hear her claim that I had lunged at her, that I had attacked her first, and she was only defending herself. "You need to get control of this situation," one of the officers said to his partner as they rushed toward me. They knelt beside me, trying to assess the wound, but all I could focus on was Karen's constant shrieking about how she had been the victim. I couldn't understand how she was getting away with this. One of the officers turned to her, asking her to drop the weapon, which she reluctantly did, but not before giving me a venomous look. "I was just protecting myself," Karen said, her voice trembling, but still, I could hear the underlying smugness. I struggled to sit up, despite the blood loss. "She shot me," I said weakly, barely able to form the words. "I didn't attack her." The officers exchanged a glance, clearly uncertain about what had just happened, but they quickly moved into action. They radioed for backup, and soon, more officers arrived to take statements from the neighbors. It didn't take long for the truth to begin to unfold. The neighbors, though initially unsure, began to tell the officers what they had seen, and their testimonies contradicted Karen's story. One neighbor even admitted to seeing her pull the gun before I had any chance to react. After the police had gathered all the necessary statements, they took Karen into custody. My mind was a whirlwind, trying to process everything that had just happened. The pain in my shoulder was excruciating, but I could still think clearly enough to understand the gravity of the situation. Karen was arrested for attempted murder. The neighbors were still in shock, not fully grasping what had unfolded right in front of their eyes. As the paramedics finally arrived and began treating my gunshot wound, I was shaken by how easily Karen had manipulated the situation. She had been so calm in her lies, so determined to twist the narrative in her favor. I had never imagined that something as trivial as an HOA dispute could escalate to this level, but Karen's actions were proof that some people would stop at nothing to get what they want. As I was transported to the hospital, I couldn't help but think about the twisted irony of it all. Karen had tried to frame me for the attack, but her own actions had sealed her fate. It was a dangerous game she had played, and now she would have to face the consequences. I knew the road ahead would be long, recovering from both the physical and emotional scars of that day. But I was determined to fight back, not just for my safety, but for the truth. Once I was out of the hospital, the real fight began. Karen had been arrested and charged with attempted murder, but I knew this would not be the end of it. The legal system is complicated, and I was prepared for a long and arduous battle to make sure she paid for what she had done. I hired a lawyer who helped me navigate the complicated legal process. We filed a lawsuit against Karen for the shooting, and at the same time, we pressed charges. My legal team worked tirelessly to collect evidence, including statements from the neighbors, the police reports, and the physical evidence from the scene. Karen, on the other hand, was using every trick in the book to get out of her charges. She was trying to portray herself as the innocent one, claiming that I had somehow provoked her. But the more she tried to manipulate the story, the more her lies started to unravel. I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice as I watched Karen squirm in the courtroom, her once confident demeanor slowly crumbling as the evidence against her mounted. She had underestimated me, and now it was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. As the trial progressed, it became clear that Karen was losing control of the narrative. The evidence against her was undeniable: the testimonies from the neighbors, the forensic evidence from the scene, and the video footage from security cameras all painted a picture of premeditated aggression on her part. Despite her best efforts to discredit me, Karen couldn't escape the truth. The jury deliberated for hours, but when the verdict came in, it was clear. Karen was guilty. She was sentenced to prison for her actions, and her days as the HOA president were over. The community, which had once feared her, finally found some semblance of peace. Karen's downfall was swift and absolute. It was a bittersweet victory for me. While I was glad to see her held accountable for her actions, I couldn't forget the trauma I had endured. The emotional scars of being shot and the deep betrayal I felt would take time to heal. But I knew one thing for sure: justice had been served, and Karen would no longer be able to manipulate anyone with her lies. After Karen's conviction, things slowly began to return to normal. I focused on healing, both physically and mentally. The gunshot wound had left a scar, but the emotional wounds were deeper. The trauma of that day and the way Karen had tried to ruin my life with her lies still haunted me, but I refused to let it define me. I took time for myself, spent more time with my family, and began to rebuild my life. I knew I would never forget the ordeal, but I also knew that I was stronger for having gone through it. The community, once divided by fear of Karen's power, started to heal as well. People reached out to me, apologizing for not standing up sooner, and we began to rebuild the trust that had been shattered by Karen's actions. In the end, Karen had not only lost her position in the HOA, but she had also lost her power over the people she had once manipulated. It was a painful reminder of how one person's actions could have a ripple effect on an entire community. But It also showed me the importance of standing up for yourself, no matter how powerful or intimidating the other person may seem. With time, the memories of that day began to fade, though they would never be fully erased. I moved forward with my life, knowing that I had fought for justice and won. Karen's actions had taken a lot from me, but they had also given me strength and resilience. I shared my story with others, hoping to inspire those who felt powerless in the face of bullying or intimidation. I learned that it's never easy to stand up for yourself, but it's always worth it in the end. And while Karen's chapter in my life was over, I knew that the lessons I had learned would stay with me forever.